Yep, as she said, I'm a musician and music producer, and I've got a piece of paper. I've been living in Scotland for 18 years. I've worked as a live sound engineer. All that time, I've also worked as making music for adverts and all sorts of music production kind of things. Played in bands like that. That was me with some friends playing some music in a band. I just finishing an album of my own. I'm about to start making an album for English folkie Eliza Carthy, so that's very exciting for me. I also finished recently a master's in composition for the screen, which is a film music master's in Edinburgh University, and the final project was to make 25 minutes of music for a film, and I thought, well, if I'm going to work for 6 months making music for a film, I'm not going to make it for anyone else's film. That's just the kind of person I am. So I made a film. But I thought, if I'm going to do something that's going to take this length of time and it's been this amount of work, it needs to be something that I really believe in. And I've always felt like an outsider, like in terms of just how I've related to the world. I've always been a bit of an outsider. And so I thought I'd make a documentary about being an outsider. And so I started with a set of questions and distributed the questions amongst my friends, who I strongly suspected were also outsiders. And the questions were things like, are you an outsider? Quite obviously.
Shouting at abuse and following him home. Because he was saying that, he knows that he's crazy and that he looks different, and that's exactly sort of what it is, because you're not the same as anyone. You are crazy. You are all these things the same.
So, during me questioning all my friends and people I knew and outsiders, I realised that actually what I felt was outsiderness was actually just a synonym for alienation, and for particularly the kind of an alienation that one experiences in childhood. And it's often a case that I think everyone sort of feels alienated in childhood a little bit, and the people who I spoke to who felt their outsideness very early on were the most keenly alienated and most outsidery of all the outsiders. Yeah, I don't make much sense, I've got to say. So great. Oh yeah, and so I was thinking, God, I'm making a film here. I'm a musician, so I thought I ought to get into the visual ideas of it. And I found this amazing female artist called Monica Canilau. You can see her on Instagram as More Feral Than. And one of my favourite parts of her practice is she does this shamanic traditional stick and poke tattoo things on her friends. Like she tattoos her friends with these sort of talismanic pictograms that once set the person as an outsider, but also provide a certain amount of protection, in a talismanic way. And so what I wanted to do was I set about designing tattoos to put as talismans onto the subjects in my movie. And so then I drew them out on After Effects and then stuck them onto people's faces like that, as a means of denoting their outsiderness or otherness, but also as a way of protecting them from the ravages of their own alienation. Where am I? So I asked everyone about their childhood alienation, and in many cases it's a wound that's still there, and in fact I think everyone sort of carries it with them really as they go through life.
Really young, I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I desperately wanted to belong everywhere. Or just seeing the anxiety and calling it what it is. Those people in that opinion completely irrelevant and unwelcome and readily dismissed.
Okay, so whilst speaking to these people, I got fantastic stories of childhood heroism and childhood fear and childhood compassion. And one of the stories was this guy. This is my brother Joe Seal. and he was just walking down the street. He was 11 years old, and across the road he could see a drunken man berating his 6-year-old daughter, and there was some confusion as to whether he was allowed to be talking to her or something, and he was really worried, and there was other people in the street that were really worried, but no one was doing anything about it. So 11-year-old boy crosses the road, and he stands in between the angry drunken man and his 6-year-old daughter and just puts his hands up. And doesn't say anything because he's got no words for the situation until a third party intervenes. And I think that kind of heroism is off. There's me, look. That kind of heroism is common actually amongst outsiders. It's people who stand up for what they believe in.
Allowing them to break up and dissolve into the nothing that surrounds them. I feel like a sort of buffer between their isolation and the rest of the world. Cooling like evaporation.
And so whilst watching and listening to the stories, an arc developed, and I realised that really what I wanted out of my film was I wanted the audience to ask themselves, am I an outsider? And then I wanted them to invariably answer, yes, I am, because in some way everyone feels alienated. And then by the end of the film, I want them to feel like it's okay to be an outsider, and actually they feel good about that outsider status. And so that influences everything I do now. I like the idea that in some ways one can be a balm for some first world problem in terms of speaking to people about their outsiderness, and it's a lovely thing to do, to speak to a friend and sit a friend down and ask them about their childhood alienation, how they felt alienated in childhood. You might get an amazing story about childhood compassion or childhood heroism, or a terribly sad story about how they grew up. But actually, what will come out of it will be a greater intimacy with a friend, and I encourage you all to do it.
Oh.